Today on the Hobby Bench, I'll be painting Iron Fist for Marvel Crisis Protocol. Today I'm going to be working on Iron Fist, continuing on my Defenders list. And here you can see I've got just a gray primer with a dry brush of white, just to lay out the foundation typically used for contrast paints. But in this case here, it's going to be a little bit different. Imperial yellow, it's a great color, but it's just a little transparent, if you will. And you need to have a different foundation, if you will, to really make that yellow stand out. So I'm going to be using bronze Fleshtone. And here, you're just going to go over sections that I've had painted before, carefully trying to get all the areas that I want to get that yellow color. That would be his belt and sash. It's going to be his boots and his mask. And so I'm just sort of carefully going through using this bronze Fleshtone acrylic paint to get that base color down, that foundation, if you will, to make those express colors work a little bit better. Now, when I'm done here, I'm going to go back and dry brush it again and dry brush it white. So you've got that foundation of bronze Fleshtone as a base, and then the white that'll be working for the highlights and really make this express color pop quite a bit more. So I've got that laid down. I'm going to go ahead and work on my paints and laying down a base coat now of the contrast paint over the sections that I have. And you're just sort of going to carefully, as you typically do, work through one section at a time. Try not to dabble too much into other areas. Of course, if you do, that's okay. You can always go back and touch up a little bit of gray primer or some white, so you can have that to work on other shades. And it's important when you're doing this too. Really, what I found out with a lot of contrast is better to work with your lighter colors first and then work towards your darker colors. So if you do make a little bit of mistakes, sometimes those darker shades can actually really just go over those without having to clean it up. You're just giving a nice, careful coat over everything. And you can sort of see right now, it's starting to work right there. You have that base yellow, but that with that white highlight, it really makes that shade pop a little bit more. And we'll just keep working up on a little bit. And here you have the final section here. You can see the mask and the belt and his boots. That really bright yellow color. Now, to keep working with this, I'm going to be working also on his pants. And I've decided to maybe drift away from using a darker tone and really stick with those comic book colors, if you will, and use orc skin. So it's a brighter green, and I sort of like that. It makes his pants stand out a little bit more, and it's just gives a nice look for these type of figures. So you're just going to be using a base coat, covering one section at a time as evenly as you can. And it's a little bit more of a challenge sometimes in a lot of these sections that don't necessarily have a lot of definition. Let's say for these legs, it's not like an armor segment or broken up by a lot of different details. So you just want to carefully go through this and make sure that you can get the even coverage that you need to. Try not to get into other areas that you painted. So you can see around the groin area and the inside of his thigh. I'm just trying to be pretty careful and not get into that sash and boots that I painted before. And here his pants are just about done. You've got the sash and boots painted up. And I've really got that nice orc skin laid down to give that a lot of color, a lot of pop to the comic book character. And just loving the look that you've got here. You have a little bit more definition. You can see like the joints behind his legs and stuff, having a little bit darker, but for the most part, got a nice coverage. Really like that color. Now, I need to work out the rest of them. You really need to have some type of mechanical agitation for a lot of these contrast paints. And you can shake them by hand, but really mechanical agitator like a nail polish shaker, it's probably a better way to go. You can leave it on there for a good 30 seconds or so, about a minute, and shake it up and get the color that you need. Really, sometimes they can settle down pretty well with a lot of medium. So you want to make sure that you really mix it up well. Here I'm just going to go ahead and lay down a foundation of fairy skin express color and work my way through the upper parts of the model's chest and around his face and stuff. And for the most part, this worked pretty well, but I realize actually it's more like the Imperial yellow. You need to have some type of other foundation to work with it. Now, what I came to discover is a gray undercoat just didn't really work well for this. It was sort of like the Imperial yellow. You need to have maybe a different type of base coat. I'd almost say that using a white undercoat will look better. So you can see here the areas of that are raised, the defined areas as muscle. You can sort of see that gray undercoat a little bit. And I realized that, probably working with just a white base coat completely probably would have worked tons and tons better. So I'm going to be fixing this a little bit. Right now we're going to work on his hand wraps, and I'll be using Khaki drill for that. Now for here, I sort of jumped ahead. I didn't want to bore you with the details. I just used a simple black for the dragon on his chest and using black on his mask with white on the eyes. Of course, it took me a little while to make sure I got it right. I just don't want to show you the times I've goofed up, having it bleed over a little bit and having to go back and paint those chest sections again. We're going to move on to the actual dragon part of his Iron Fist and using Martian Orange Express. It's a very bright, vibrant color, and I wanted to have that as a base for the entire flaming dragon section here. Now, it is a relatively bright hue, so I just had to be careful around his hand. Just wanted to make sure I didn't necessarily get it into the wraps he had. Also, it's a difficult section to work on with the model because of his sash for his mask. It sort of bleeds in a little bit onto the other side of that flaming dragon. So you just want to be really careful here. Make sure you get a nice even coverage, but just be careful also not to get into other sections of the model that you already painted. I'm sort of filling into a little bit of the mouth detail here and just carefully working around areas I painted before. And there you are. I've got that base coat all lined up. Now I'm going to go back to the pants again, and I'm going to get a little bit more highlight using lime green acrylics. And so I've been sort of going back and forth a bit here. For this type of stuff, I recommend really looking at the top of the model and just getting that higher perspective, sort of see where areas would naturally gather up a lot of the light. And just using a wet blend here to work my way through using that lime green, just sort of highlighting areas I think that would definitely pick out a little bit more color. And orc skin, it's pretty bright color, so you just want to add a little bit more definition, and I think that lime green just really adds a tad more depth in that, using a little bit more water to sort of blend that out a little bit so it's not quite as opaque, but just slowly working through sections that I think that would capture that light and add a little bit more definition to his pants. Just working through that. You can sort of see there now it's a pretty subtle look, but it adds just a little bit more definition to his pants and make that work out. Now I'm going to go back and dry brush more sections on the dragon using transparent yellow. It's pretty nice color, really sort of a vibrant yellow, and just working through this carefully, just doing some dry brushing. It's just a very subtle technique. It just takes a little while. Sometimes to get it, you really want to work that dry brush onto a paper towel, get off a lot of the paint. You can sort of see here now on the top of his head of that dragon that I'm slowly getting a little bit more color added to it. And there you go. You've got that fiery orange base coat with that transparent yellow highlight. It gives a great look to the flaming dragon. Now, like for his pants, I'm going to work a little bit more on his chest area. I'm just going to be using different highlights. I'm using basic skin tone, just as acrylic paint, thinned down pretty well. And just like those pants, looking at the areas that are a little lighter in color and just going through those sections pretty carefully with this to add a little bit more of gradation in color and really sort of fix that gray undercoat a little bit. Now, I'm going to say the crevices in his back and his muscles, how they were defined out, that Fairy Skin Express paint worked great. But for the lighter sections, I think a gray undercoat didn't really work out well. Probably if I had to do it again, I would just paint it white. I've done one coat and it would have been fine. So I'm just going to go back here, add a little bit more definition to that, sort of blend that thinned out sections just a little bit more and give it a better look. And so that's all I'm just doing is working on those areas of his muscles that sort of stand out a little bit more and catch that light and use that thin color. And Iron Fist is just about done. I used a couple more contrast paints. I used Armor Green for the grate, and I used Willow Bark just to give a little bit of different color to the curb. I also used that Willow Bark as a nice brown to cover the last sections of his hair that might be sticking out underneath his mask. A little bit of gray on the base to just dry brush and add a little bit more texture to it. And there you are. Iron Fist is done and ready for the tabletop.